Researchers studying last month's heat wave across Western Europe found something that should change how you think about when a heat wave actually becomes dangerous. Using the World Weather Attribution Framework, they confirmed that human-caused climate change made the extreme daytime temperatures recorded during that event more than 10 times more likely than they would have been decades ago. But when they looked specifically at the nighttime temperatures during that same heat wave, the numbers were not 10 times more likely, they were roughly 100 times more likely. Not the daytime highs everyone was watching on the forecast, the nights. The part of a heat wave almost every headline treats as the E relief period, the part where the body is supposed to finally get a break, has become, according to the actual attribution science, the single most dramatically altered piece of this entire phenomenon. And right now, as a heat dome eases across parts of the United States and daytime highs begin dropping back toward normal, the exact same pattern is playing out again, forecasters warning that overnight lows are staying stubbornly in the 80s across huge stretches of the country, even as the daytime numbers finally start to look like relief. This is the story of why what comes after a heat wave's daytime peak can genuinely be more dangerous than the peak itself, what is actually happening to nighttime temperatures as the planet warms, and why the scientists studying this say it deserves far more attention than it currently receives. No. Hype? No exaggeration, just what the research and the current forecast data actually show. Drop a comment and tell me if it has felt hotter at night than you would expect this summer, even after a stretch of daytime heat technically broke, because if it has, your own body has already noticed exactly the pattern this video is about to explain. I read every one of these. If you want grounded weather and health coverage built on the actual published science, instead of recycled panic, subscribe. It is free and alike helps this reach people who need to understand this before the next heat wave arrives. Let us go for 5,000 likes on this one. Thank you. Now let us get into it. To understand why nighttime heat can end up mattering more than the daytime peak, you first have to understand what the human body actually needs in order to recover from a hot day. And it is not simply a lower number on the thermometer. Core body temperature needs a real window, several consecutive hours, where the surrounding air is cool enough and dry enough for the body to shed. The heat it absorbed during the day and returned closer to its normal baseline before the next hot day begins. When overnight low temperatures stay at or above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, particularly when combined with high humidity, that recovery window effectively disappears. The body keeps trying to cool itself through sweating, but without a meaningful temperature difference between skin and surrounding air, that sweat provides little to no actual cooling benefit, according to health researchers who study this exact mechanism. The result is that heat stress, rather than resetting overnight the way it is supposed to, simply keeps accumulating hour after hour, night after night, which is precisely why public health researchers increasingly describe warm nights, not hot afternoons, as the detail that turns an uncomfortable stretch of summer weather into a genuinely dangerous one. Cities face this risk more acutely than surrounding rural areas, and the reason comes down to simple physics rather than anything unique to urban life itself. Concrete, asphalt, and building materials absorb enormous amounts of heat throughout the day and then release that stored heat back into the surrounding air slowly, over many hours, well after the sun has gone down. This phenomenon, known as the urban heat island effect, can leave city neighborhoods running as much as 10 degrees hotter overnight than nearby rural areas experiencing the exact same daytime weather. Layer onto that the simple fact that many residents, particularly in denser urban housing, keep windows closed overnight for safety reasons, even during dangerous heat, and homes that should be cooling down instead behave, in the words of researchers who study this pattern, like ovens that never fully switch off. One detailed analysis of the record-breaking 2022 heat wave in London found that the urban heat island effect specifically, isolated from the broader heat wave itself, could be responsible for as much as half of that event's total heat-related mortality in the city. A striking figure given that the same broader 2022 heat wave was estimated to have caused around 62,000 excess deaths across Europe as a whole. The physiological risk from warm nights is not evenly distributed either, and understanding who faces the greatest danger from this specific mechanism matters just as much as understanding the mechanism itself. Young children under the age of 4, elderly adults, people living in homes without reliable air conditioning, and anyone managing a chronic illness face the highest risk from nights that fail to cool down, according to public health guidance built specifically around this pattern. A person can lose as much as 2 liters of fluid overnight through sweating alone when overnight temperatures climb above 85 degrees, a level of fluid loss that, combined with inadequate rehydration overnight while asleep, can meaningfully raise the risk of heat exhaustion or heat stroke by the following morning. before a person has even stepped outside into the next day's heat. Here is the part of this pattern that should concern anyone paying attention to how summers are changing over the longer term, because this is not simply a feature of any single heat wave. It is a broader trend climate researchers have been documenting for years. Nighttime temperatures have been rising faster than daytime temperatures across most populated regions of the world for decades now, a trend confirmed in the United States by the National Climate Assessment. Kelton Miner, a postdoctoral research scientist at Columbia University's Data Science Institute who studies this exact phenomenon, has pointed out that most people simply do not realize hot nighttime temperatures have been outpacing daytime temperature increases across most populated regions worldwide in recent decades. Researchers studying the underlying mechanism point to atmospheric moisture as the key driver, explaining that as days grow warmer, the atmosphere holds more moisture, and while that extra moisture tends to reflect incoming sunlight during the day, slightly moderating how hot daytime highs become. At night, that same moisture works in reverse, trapping outgoing heat near the surface instead of letting it escape, which is a meaningful part of why nights are warming disproportionately faster than days across so much of the world. The current heat pattern across the United States is offering a live, real-time example of exactly this dynamic as this video is being made. Even as daytime highs have begun easing back from the extremes recorded earlier this summer, forecasters have specifically flagged that overnight lows across huge stretches of the eastern half of the country are staying in the low 80s, providing essentially no meaningful nighttime recovery, even on days when the daytime forecast finally starts to look like good news. Alex De Silva, a meteorologist with AccuWeather, has been tracking the same trend of warming overnight lows and confirmed that the broader pattern continues to point toward nights running warmer relative to historical norms, consistent with the longer-term national trend researchers have already documented. The fifth national climate assessment specifically noted that the number of nights where the temperature never falls below 70 degrees Fahrenheit is increasing in nearly every region of the United States, with the northern Great Plains standing out as one of the only regions where that trend has not yet clearly taken hold. This matters enormously for how heatwave danger actually gets communicated to the public, because nearly every headline, every advisory, and every casual conversation about a heatwave tends to center entirely on the daytime high, the single number that appears on a phone's weather app and drives most people's sense of whether a hot stretch has ended. Lisa Patel, executive director of the Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health, has specifically pushed back on that framing, explaining plainly that the moisture-trapping mechanism responsible for warmer nights means the relief people expect once the sun goes down is becoming less reliable, even as daytime numbers themselves start to look more normal. That gap between perceived relief and actual physiological relief is precisely why public health researchers increasingly argue that heat warnings built entirely around daytime temperature thresholds are missing a genuinely dangerous piece of the picture, one that, by its very nature, tends to affect people while they are asleep and least equipped to notice their own symptoms worsening. There's a practical economic dimension to this problem that compounds everything already covered, and it specifically affects the households least equipped to absorb it. Running air conditioning overnight, every single night across a multi-week stretch of warm nights rather than just during the hottest afternoons, meaningfully raises electricity costs for households already managing tight budgets, which researchers who study heat vulnerability say can lead some residents to quietly ration their own cooling overnight. Specifically, turning units off or setting them warmer once they go to bed in an effort to save money, precisely during the hours when public health guidance says consistent cooling matters most. Utility assistance programs designed around daytime heat emergencies do not always account for this overnight specific financial pressure, and researchers studying urban heat vulnerability have increasingly called for cooling assistance programs to explicitly address the cost of overnight air conditioning use during extended warm night stretches, rather than treating heat assistance purely as a daytime intervention. So what does the actual data say about how much of this summer's heat risk has been hiding, specifically inside these warmer nights, rather than the daytime peaks nearly everyone has been focused on? NOAA's own 10-year preliminary average, covering 2015 through 2024, puts annual heat deaths in the United States at 238, a figure researchers note already makes heat the single deadliest weather hazard in a typical year, ahead of hurricanes, tornadoes, and flooding combined. That baseline number, built primarily around tracking severe daytime heat events, is precisely the kind of figure public health researchers argue is likely to keep climbing specifically because of the nighttime component, since a genuinely dangerous night can push a person already weakened by the preceding day's heat past a threshold that same night's low temperature alone, viewed in isolation, would never have predicted. So what does all of this actually mean for you, wherever you are watching this from, and whatever the daytime forecast looks like this week? The practical lesson is not that daytime heat no longer matters. It clearly still does, and remains the more immediately obvious danger during the hottest hours of any given day. The lesson is that the moment a daytime forecast starts to look like relief is exactly the moment public health researchers say people should be paying closer attention to the overnight low, not less, checking whether tonight's forecasted low sits at or above 80 degrees, treating that number with the same seriousness as an afternoon heat advisory, prioritizing air conditioning or a cooling center overnight, specifically for elderly relatives, young children, or anyone managing a chronic illness, and understanding that a body already stressed from several consecutive hot days needs a genuinely cool night to recover, not simply a slightly cooler one, are all direct practical responses to exactly the mechanism this research describes. The honest, grounded summary is this. Attribution research on last month's Western Europe heatwave found that human-caused climate change made extreme nighttime temperatures during that event roughly 100 times more likely, compared to a 10 times increase in likelihood for the daytime highs that received nearly all of the public attention. That finding reflects a documented decades-long trend of nighttime temperatures rising faster than daytime temperatures across most populated regions of the world, driven by atmospheric moisture that reflects heat during the day but traps it at night, and compounded in cities by an urban heat island effect capable of keeping urban neighborhoods running up to 10 degrees hotter overnight than nearby rural areas experiencing identical daytime weather. That same urban heat island effect was found responsible for as much as half of all heat-related deaths during London's record-breaking 2022 heatwave specifically. And right now, across the United States, forecasters are watching exactly this pattern play out in real time. Daytime highs beginning to ease while overnight lows stay stubbornly elevated, offering the kind of hollow relief that, according to the researchers who study this mechanism closely, can end up being just as dangerous, or in some cases more dangerous, than the daytime peak everyone was watching in the first place. We are going to keep tracking this pattern exactly the way we tracked it today, straight from the National Weather Service, NOAA, and the researchers actually studying how nighttime temperatures are changing, not recycled headlines built entirely around the daytime number. Subscribe so you do not miss how this pattern develops as the rest of summer unfolds, because based on everything we just walked through, the relief a cooler forecast promises is not always the relief your body actually receives. And leave that comment below. Tell me whether the nights where you live have felt unusually warm this summer, even on days when the daytime heat itself finally started to ease, because your own experience of that is very likely backed up by exactly the data this video just walked through, and it is worth paying attention to well before the next stretch of daytime relief tricks you into thinking the danger has fully passed. Because behind every one of these numbers is a family finally exhaling after a brutal week of daytime heat, closing their windows for safety the way they always have, and unknowingly spending another night inside a home that never actually got the chance to cool down. 5,000 likes on this one. Let us go. See you in the next one.